So good morning. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm good, Bertha. How are you?
Good, good, doing well. So thank you, number one, for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk with you because usually when I do these, I'm interviewing someone that's not in my space. And so I'm excited that you and I have connected and we work in the same space in the realm of hiring, firing employees, how best practices overall. So welcome, and really looking forward to getting this started to hear some good nuggets of wisdom that you could share with us today. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So just to give a little bit of background, Chris, about you and where you started. So right now you are the owner of Allium, which is a recruiting company, and you specialize primarily in the tech industry. And so do you mind just sharing with us a little bit your background, how you got here, and what led you to forming Allium?
Absolutely. So I actually got recruited into recruiting. So I've been in it for 12 years now. I've worked for some of the largest firms in the industry, and I've worked in a lot of different areas, skill set wise. So I started off staffing high volume call centers. Then I transitioned into skilled trades. So in engineering as well. So I transitioned that. I got into tech about 6 years ago, and it wasn't a niche I knew any information or had any experience on, but once I got into it, I could not get out of it. So I love technology, how it changes every couple of years. And so I worked for a couple firms doing that. The pandemic came and we had some time at home. My wife, who was also in recruiting and helping a firm grow significantly in the healthcare space, we just started talking about, what could we provide clients? Could we do this on our own? And in April of 2021, we launched Allium, and so we just hit our 2-year mark. So it's been an amazing journey. I've learned a ton along the way. The connections I've made, like yourself, have just been such a huge impact on my career up to this point.
Congratulations. That is a big feat when we go from working in the industry to actually owning our own business and kind of making our way. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. You as well.
So I wanted to talk with you today primarily on best practices. And so what I'd like to do, if you're okay with this, is talk about a hypothetical and give you a set of facts of a company that they're not necessarily a tech company, but they do a lot of work in the technology industry, and they utilize a lot of people with tech backgrounds. And so maybe we can use this sort of as a platform to jumpstart our conversation, if you don't mind. So let me just share my screen with you really quickly. The case study that I put together is actually a client of mine. I changed the names and things like that, of course, but when I first partnered with this company, they had been in business not that long. I joined shortly after 2020, but there were two co-founders. One was a tech person and one was a salesman. And so what they do is they sell kits online, testing kits. And so we had two individuals that had two unique backgrounds. And so as they began to build the company, they decided to utilize their own skill sets and their own finances. And so it worked for them. They were able to put together a website. They purchased some technology. They were able to scale a little bit and add some individuals to their C-suite. As they started going into year 2, they started adding employees, and they got an investor that was interested. So they knew once the investor was poking around that they needed to get their technology straight. And so what they decided to do was start to hire individuals that were tech savvy, but they weren't paying them the right way. They were paying them mostly with equity and partial payment. And so that didn't last. That wasn't sustainable. And so they eventually started to get fractured. And so by the end of year 3, they lost their C-suite, they lost the investor, and they lost a lot of techs, technicians. And so from just hearing the story when I first started dealing with them, one of the things that I recognize immediately, and this is what I want to turn to you and get your insight on, was how do you know when it's time to hire? Because they base their decisions on some external forces. Is that the right way to handle it? Or are there other things that business owners should keep in mind when it's time to hire?
No, absolutely. I love this example because I work with similar companies, ones that are funded, ones that are 2 to 3 years old, and those are the questions they're asking. What's our next step? We've got to this point. What do we do next? When I've always looked at, when you look at an investor in a company, they're looking at growth. That's how they keep engaged. That's how they're going to keep investing in the company. So when you look to a hiring process, anywhere you're looking at it from an ROI standpoint. So I think it's really important for companies to think about a timeline of when that person starts to when they are going to be bringing strong ROI that's going to continue that revenue growth in your business. So when you look at, in my experience, typical hiring processes, and I mean from the day the manager says, I need to hire, that I'd say it's anywhere from 45 up to 90 days, depending on the skill set. Technology is a very tight market. It's a candidate-driven market, so you have to be able to attract candidates to your company. That can take some time. So when you're looking at that, I think that's important to have in your business plan, even as hypothetical as it could be, right? Think about 3 years down the road. Think about, when this comes out and we bring on X amount of clients, when are we going to need those individuals, and start having that idea and that process figured out and lined out. Somewhere they need to speak with somebody like you, get those policies in process so they know they're doing it correctly. From there, it's really understanding the time to fill, and really you're wanting to get what your average time for your hiring pipeline is. What I mean by that is that when you're hiring at this level, it's tracking the data. And so when you say, if it's going to take us 45 days to hire the right person that's going to get us the ROI that we want, then we need to plan for that when we have a hiring decision or hiring need, we know at minimum 45 days from now is when we're going to have that person in the seat. What do we need to do to cover that in the meantime? In my experience, a lot of companies, quick to hire is a dangerous game to get into without understanding what the current market is, how many people are truly available, and how you're going to attract them. I have lots of clients that say, I needed that person yesterday. But that makes my job a lot harder because it's such a rush. The more days you don't have that person, the more risk you are losing revenue, specifically, potentially your investor, like this example did. So you need to be very cognizant. It doesn't come up when a startup mentality. Your idea is growth, your idea is revenue, customer retention, customer acquisition. So these are really good tips. If you just look at that bottom reference, average time for your hiring pipeline, that is a great way to look at it.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing you say is that the number one question, or maybe not the number one, but the first question you should be asking, a business owner should be asking themselves, is the ROI. What is the return of investment that I, as a business owner, am going to get with adding another person to our team, specifically a technician or a tech person? And then based on that, when that question is answered, then we should understand that when we engage someone like you, we're looking at a 90-day, sometimes 45 to 90-day process to bringing them on.
Yeah, it's average, and it's when you're coming to me and that's that I needed them yesterday example, right?
Gotcha.
That's where it's going to lengthen your time, because there's a lot of questions that need to be answered in that time frame. And that's a lot of what I do, is qualifying, okay, what are you truly needing? What is the business reason for this hire? Then bringing that to market. It's not as easy as just putting up a posting. It's not as easy as putting up a LinkedIn message. You need to understand, because attracting talent in this market, candidates want to hear the good story about the company. Where is it going? So the clients I work with, I want to know what their career path could be for that individual. That's how you're going to attract the right talent. And ROI, it could not just be revenue. Time is money. And so if you're, a technology person, if you find the right person and it takes your projects and it cuts them down 30% from completion, that is revenue because you're getting projects done quicker. That's better for your customer acquisitions. So you got to look at ROI. It's not just money, but if you're hiring the right person, you can retain them that are really, really strong, and that helps you save time. That's as good as money as well.
That makes 100% sense, because I think if I'm putting it in sort of a practical application, in the sense that if we have a company that similar to the one that I just read, where they have a website or technology that the revenue is dependent on, if they need someone, a tech person, to service that, and they don't have it, it is going to impact the revenue, because that's where they get their money from, that technology or the website.
Absolutely. And that hiring pipeline is important. If you know it's going to take 45 days and that's going to affect your website from running, how are you going to manage that in the meantime? Because if you don't, how much money will you lose by that not being effective? I mean, we see website crashes all the time and craziness that happens in the market. So, I mean, if you don't have that mindset when you're looking at hiring somebody, you're going to realize there's more issues on the other side. And then when they come to me, which is going to come at an extra cost as well, those are things they don't want to deal with. And so any education I can provide up front is just having that plan in place.
Got you. And then what I hear you saying as well is that it has to be a thoughtful process, right? Because a lot of times what business owners tend to do is, like you said, oh, I think I just need a body right now just to, do something, throw up an ad and, boom.
Yeah.
It doesn't, realistically, to get the quality help, it doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting recruiting world. Technology has changed things. AI has been involved in that. And so when you look at it, candidates don't search for jobs in the traditional ways. There's no right way to do it. I mean, I would say LinkedIn's my main factor, but I don't always get everybody on there. I get them through referrals. I get them through other ways. So I think, as a business owner, not coming from a recruiting background, you can't think of it as, well, we need to hire, I'm just going to toss something out there and then I'll get what I need because that person's just going to come to me. It doesn't work that way. And I think it's just a education that people just don't have because they don't do what I do every day. So.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. And in my experience, the hiring is probably the biggest asset of any company, your people asset. So it's really important to be thoughtful about it and, to find the right person.
Bertha, I was there when I started Allium. It was my wife came from recruiting. She was going to be my recruiter. We were going to conquer the world. We were going to take market share. And that lasted for about 6 months. And we were both like, I can't handle all this. Because if your goal is to grow, there's a great book I read that's called Who Not How. If you don't have a passion for it, or you don't want to take it on and spend your hours doing it, you're going to have to hire somebody. So you have to look at that is your revenue. Your people are your growth. They are your revenue. So if you're going to do that, you have to attract them to the same mission that you're on, which as a business owner and entrepreneur, it's hard to have people translate the same passion you do. It's your baby. It's what you grew. And you can't have an expectation that everybody else is going to have that. So you've got to get creative with how you're attracting talent that's going to be a partnership to continue this growth.
Right. Yeah, that all makes sense to me. So I wanted to just throw a couple of things at you from a risk and liability standpoint. That's the world that I really operate in mostly, because when I go to a client, one of the first things we do is we just take a look at their foundation, which I think that may be something that you were sharing that you do too. You want to understand really what's in place. And so for the company, and so I have devised sort of this 4-step process in terms of what is important. Okay, now that you've realized that you need to hire someone and they've reached out to you, Chris, to help them find someone, what do they need as a company in place to make sure that this hire stays with them, that they're doing things correctly? And so number one, I always make sure that they have the right hiring and onboarding systems in place. And I know this may sound basic, but something just as simple as the payroll system. How are you paying individuals? How are you tracking time? How are you onboarding them? Do you have training systems in place? What are they going to be doing? What are the KPIs? And just all of that stuff to make sure that the relationship starts out on a strong foundation. So we look at that. And then the second thing is, what are the HR policies and procedures that they use to manage this new hire that they have on? And then step 3, we check and see what agreements do they have in place? What forms are they using to do the onboarding? And then lastly, what training are they giving? Are they just throwing someone at the job and say, okay, go for it and figure it out? Or are they actually taking the time to train this person to make sure that they're set up for success long term, as opposed to, failing from the beginning and then sort of, flailing out? And so I wanted to just get, some of your insight, number one, with whether these are things that you look for as well when you're inquiring about a company, or, if there's anything else you can add.
Yeah. My word for this is transparency. That's perfect word for it, Bertha, because that's what candidates want to know. I'm talking to them about, this is the yin to my yang, as far as recruiting. I'm talking to them about the job. I'm talking about the company. I'm talking about what cool things they do, what they could be doing, what their advancement opportunities. This is the structure that's super critical once they get to the hiring process, because it's dating, right? It's like dating. It's like, hey, this is great. This is, hey, that was a great first dinner. This is awesome. And then you go on social media and you find things out. This is what that is, because you look at it like candidates will get unsure and uncertain if this is not ironclad. And so when you have it really streamlined, when you have the communication on point, when they don't have to ask a lot of questions, they're just bought in more into the company. They're like, yes, this is going so smoothly. The other day, there was somebody that posted on LinkedIn about an application that was the best onboarding experience that they had. That's proof right there that it's important to candidates. And so what you do is super important. We called somebody like you, one of the first calls we made when we started Allium, about how to put this in place, not just for us, for we hire, but also to understand it from what our clients are doing. Because as a recruiter, you get the offer, they accept, great. The last thing you want is the text of, hey, when am I getting my onboarding? Hey, when am I doing this? Hey, what is going on? If you roll that into a weekend, that's a candidate for 3 days thinking about, I'm not sure, why haven't I gotten that yet? What's up in the air? Because it's a life change for them. They're about to resign from a current job. They're about to take on a new career. They're excited about a company that everybody who goes to a new company hopes it's their forever company. So I think this process where you're presenting is perfect. It's not basic by any means. It's transparent.
Awesome. I love that. I'm going to use your dating analogy.
Recruiting is dating and gossiping. That's what it is. It's all gossip.
That's hilarious. I want to pivot for a moment, because one of the things that we talk about more and more every day, it wasn't a conversation pre-COVID, of course, was this whole idea of onboarding remote people or having remote workers. And for us, I'll be honest with you, it's really turned the employment law practice upside down, because we have to think about everything differently now. Whereas before, when you onboard someone, the presumption was they were going to be in your office and, you can do a lot of this stuff. But now, and I'd like to also hear your perspective on where these remote people usually, we're finding them and how that impacts the relationship. The dating turned into a marriage.
Yeah. When it comes to remote work, we were flipped upside down with the pandemic. It just became more known, and more companies had to adjust rather than, I was remote pre-pandemic. The staffing firm I worked for, they did it for a financial reason. They got rid of all brick and mortar offices. They saved a ton of money on that, and everybody worked remote, and they invested to make it work. Production actually went up for us. We kept the relationships with our managers. We kept that going, and it was worked really well. Now companies, almost every company had to either think about this, adjust to it, or fully implement it. And I think that's what people were really concerned about. You have different views on what's right and what's wrong, but you look at it where, 3 years removed and what the world looks like now, if you look at remote, it's been going on since 2005. And you look at where workers are, that's 63% of saying they would find a new job if they could work remotely. I mean, that's a pretty solid number. Are they all 100% dead set it has to be remote? No, but they want options and they want the flexibility of the company. And then when you look at the top three factors, remote, salary, work-life balance, those are your hiring criteria, and that what I call are motivators for candidates. And so when they look at that, those are things for companies to evaluate and put time and effort into, because you can create processes around that do keep that marriage strong. We have technology through Teams, Zoom, everything to have regular meetings. I have one client that does it really well. They adjusted really well from being 100% on site to where they keep everybody in their city in the market, and they all come on site once a quarter, and they make it like an all week type of thing. So they're already communicating, and for the candidate, it's like, okay, I only go on site once a quarter. That's great. I have the ability to go in whenever I want, and it just keeps that culture, keeps that team orientation. So those are ways you can keep the marriage, but you have to think creatively. You can't. We've always done it this way cannot be your response to it. So when you look at utilizing Teams, we used to do, everybody was doing the happy hours on Teams and on Zooms. People are used to that now. And so you can throw in those things, and, people get more time back in remote work. So production has gone up. I've seen where kind of the median is a hybrid schedule that keeps kind of both of them. So workers and candidates, not all of them. Some of them want 100% remote, but majority of them do appreciate it because they do have that flexibility and they have options. But they also get to go in the office, interact with their peers, interact with their manager, kind of be in the mix of the company running. So I think hybrid is a necessary option to look at. So even if you're a company that is not trying to do that now, and some companies are necessary for on-site, I think it's smart to at least look at how can you be set up to do it if something happens like a pandemic requires you to make that adjustment. That's what happened. Companies did not have that in place. So it cost them a lot of money. Teams and Zoom made a lot of money doing those things, and it was a necessary evil. So I think having that mindset, even if you're doing on-site now, are you prepared to be able to offer remote? Because if you get that rock star and they are asking for things and you're willing to adjust, you have to be prepared to adjust as well.
Right. Wow. So you really have to keep a pulse on the trends, the hiring trends, right? And you're saying right now, remote, salary probably will never change, but the remote and the work-life balance, it's super important right now.
Yeah, options. I mean, that's candidates want options, because if you look at Tampa alone, right? Since the pandemic, it's not just Tampa companies going after candidates. There's companies in New York, companies in California that are embracing remote, that are stealing talent. So when you look at on-site, your candidate pool goes from here, hybrid opens up a little bit, and remote just gives you all of them. So why not be prepared to talk to all candidates and then justify your decisions on how you want to do those things, rather than just limiting yourself in one pool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a win-win. Why not?
Absolutely.
And some of the benefits that, I just wanted that you had shared with us as well. And some of the things that you've been touching on is the, increasing retention, which is the most expensive is, the whole hire and fire cycle. It's like, do that, it just becomes very expensive. So, in turn, you reduce costs. And like you said, your talent pool becomes a lot bigger if you have the options to offer for remote. But to your point, I think hybrid is sort of a happy medium, for both the employee and the employer. And so, I mean, it's changing very quickly. And to be honest, even with this whole AI on the horizon or here,
right?
I think even that may cause people who aren't already in the remote realm to really shift to it, because if you don't, you're going to be considered this old school company that's like, You're still using typewriters and
I know. I mean, look what technology's done in 3 years. I mean, give it 15 years. I mean, we're not going to have options. This is the way it is. And I mean, just from this point, I probably have 2 to 3 conversations with companies a week on we are considering hybrid, we're adjusting to a remote schedule, working on things. And this is 3 years past the pandemic. So I think it's happening already. Companies are considering it. And I think it's just going to be, if you want to compete for talent and grow your company, you just need to have all options, at least from a, ability standpoint, to be able to handle it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. So the last piece I kind of wanted to just touch on, and it's really been the things that we've been talking about is, all right, we did our homework, we got the right foundation, we hired the person, now what? Where do we go from here? And some of the themes that we've been talking about that I just want to reiterate is, number one, just being thoughtful in the hiring process, and that sometimes requires a conversation with Chris, like, why are we hiring? What are we to get out? All those things. And then also being collaborative and making sure that you're not making these decisions in your head all by yourself. You're bouncing these ideas or thoughts with individuals like you and me. And then lastly, and I think probably more importantly, is communication from the work that we do, which is, litigation. Honestly, all the issues start with communication and end with communication. There's been a breakdown in the communication.
Yes, that stat stuck out to me, 95%, because I was like, oh my gosh, that is true, but I could see how that could happen just in a miscommunication. And before you know it, you're getting a phone call and this is an issue now.
Yeah. It's crazy because sometimes from the lawyer standpoint, when a client tells us, these are our issues I'm having with an employee, and as I hear them talking about it, I say to myself, but if only you would have not said this, or maybe you should have said this, you wouldn't have to spend all this money, because it's mind blowing to me to see how just one simple, conversation face to face or like this can change dramatically the trajectory of your relationship with your employee.
Yeah, that collaboration, and you have it right there, proactive in that. I mean, ask those questions ahead before you even do it, just so self-educate yourself.
Are there any sort of, if you could, whether it's one top tip that you would give for, someone that is in the hiring phase, what would you say is, big picture, hey, this is the most important thing that you need to think about as you start to scale, expand, or even start thinking about starting this process?
I would say education and preparedness. Education to know what that process looks like and how you're going to execute it. Preparedness, be prepared to tell your story. That's what candidates want to hear, is the company story. We always go off of job descriptions every day, but they want to know about the company. A .NET developer knows .NET. You don't need to read them .NET. Is going to be part of screening? Sure. They want to know what the company's doing. And so from business owners, if you're not contacting somebody like myself, think about that. Put your story together. Why did you start the company? Why are you at the company, the positives, and put that into the interview process.
Got it. I love it. And if they do want to contact you, how and what is the best way to reach you?
Sure. You can go to allierresources.com. We have a great website. We have our video on there that is very transparent on how we operate. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So I'm always happy to have conversations, whether you're looking for a recruiting partnership now or in 5 years. One of the main reasons that I went off on my own was have the ability to collaborate, learn myself, as well as help educate other people that are trying to achieve the goals that I've seen so many companies try to achieve over my career.
That's awesome. I don't hear that often with a recruiting company, like, hey, we actually want to educate you and make you a partner in this process. So that's awesome that's your philosophy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate, all the nuggets that you've shared with us. And I'm hopeful that, when someone hears this, that they start with, what is our story? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And before they get to the next stage, they'll be prepared and, reaching out to you and me to
Yep.
help the foundation.
Yep. Create your story and then gossip. And there you go. Thank you so much, Bertha. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.